React Query considered between the best state management libraries in the market in these days, with ability for cache performance optimization and decouple more than multiple requests at the time, and etc. Despite all of that, it is very simple to understand and follow the flow of the data without almost zero config. In this tutorial, we will build a React Native app with React Query. First, we start by initializing a folder or an app. So you can see that I already created the app, but you can use this command. For me, I use the template as a Typescript, so I'm using React Native and say init my app. You can call it whatever you want. Then we will check what you need to install. So what you need to install is simple, just by saying we add React Query. The other thing that you need to install is React Navigation, and by installing the packages like React Native Stack and React just Native. So you just this is the first one, and the other one will be Native Stack, and we are good to go, and we can build that. But just make sure that these but because React Navigation will be used the CocoaPods, so you need to make sure that the iOS is installed, and also in Android. In this case, I would recommend to go, like, for example, for me, I have a command to just go to the iOS and start the pod installation, and also go back to my directory. So just to make sure that the pod installation is done. Now we jump in the VS Code inside the app. I removed everything and we start from scratch. So what we need to do first, we import the React Query. So this is the start point of our app, and then we bring the query provider and the query client from React Query. And then inside the app, we just need to create a new query client, and that's by just saying query client, which imported from React Query here. And then this will give us the ability to have the higher order component that will be wrapped our app. So here we bring the client provider and we send the client query. Similarly, like Redux and any implementation to actually for higher order components. And then what we need to do is bring the navigation to make a navigation, so we can navigate between the screens, and we make a navigation stack here. So what we need to do is bring the navigation container, and then inside it we will make the root route. So the root route is our entry for all the navigation, but this component is not created yet. So now we will bring the stack navigator from React Navigation Stack, and we will create a new stack navigator. So in this stack navigator, we will create the root route, which is the one that we talk about, and then we bring the stack.navigator. This stack navigator will have multiple screens here, and one of them is the collection. This is what we will call our main screen, and then we will bring the photo list component. The photo list will be here, and we will jump soon to it. And then the other component, or the other screen, it will be the photo itself, where we will navigate to photo to see what is going on. And actually, this one you can ignore it for now. I will come back to it later. I did a file called queries, where I will put all the queries here. So what first I will do is that I will bring all the import statements. So first I am using the pixels endpoint, and here I'm using their package or npm package to bring all the client and also do the fetching. Actually, in the behind the scenes, we'll use the same principles, which is use fetch after all. Then bring the API key. So you need to create an API key for pixels, but it's for free, so just create an account. And then you will have the user query from React Query. This is the main function that we will use inside this file. You can create a client by sending the API, and then you just check if this the API in the environment variable. So publish this one to get. We will go to the interface. So we will create an interface called iUsePhotos, because we will create a function called useSearchPhotos. This useSearchPhotos will return type of iUsePhotos as a data, error fetching, loading, and error. So the main parameters here is the collection ID that we want to send, and the page. Collection ID is actually what is called is that the search query here. Then we will make the function useQuery. This will distract, you can extract it from success error, data is loading as error. I will come back to these in specific, or actually we can talk about it now. So useQuery is it will extract couple variables. One of them is that is success, which means that the status of the query is fulfilled. It means that there is a data. So you can take the data and you can make some conditions to make sure that there is a data, or you can have the success, which means that there is a data. Now there is also is loading, which means that for this query the fetching is the status of the fetching. And also there is an is error, which means the same as an error. So what is the type of error? And is error is a boolean, so these are connected. There is also another one is called is fetching, and is fetching, it meant to be either for this query or any query if this query is fetching in the background. So I don't think this is an ideal solution if you want to have a rendering component, because sometimes if you want to show a component depending on this query, so you can have the loading. But if you want to have to check if any background fetching or loading, then you will have a value called is fetching, and then you can extract it from here. The first parameter for the user query is the key, and this key can be an array or can be just a string, the first element of the string. This key should be unique, and then you can put any dependent, or what they called it, any unique IDs that will be that can be also extracted. In this case, I will go back to this ID why I put this one here, but actually you can as I said, take out the array and then you just make the string. The second one is the promise function, and this is the most part here, where we have to either we will have to pass a promise function. So this promise function, it needs to have two things, either to resolve the data or throwing the error. It should throw the error. So in this case, you can pass async to this function and wait for the client. You can have manipulation here for the data before you return it. You can also check, for example, the fetch API. When you say fetch and then you pass your URL, this fetch normally don't throw an error, so you need to throw it manually. So in this case, this will determine if there is an error data. So throwing an error, it needs to be manually in case of fetch. Axios, for example, uses its own and it will throw an error, so you don't need to handle it. The third parameter, and it's optionally to be passed, is that if you want to have an option here. But for this case, you can use the option that you will send, like an ID enabled, and I will talk about this later. Now you can have something, I do this only for the typing because I have a response. You can check if the success and there is no error, so we can return only the data and loading. Otherwise we can return also error, loading, error and is loading, or what that, if there is an error, just a boolean value. We'll create a query where we need to fetch all the collection. So first we will start by creating the interface, which is what I call it iUseCollection, and then we'll have the data as collection response. And then the has error is a boolean, is fetching collection boolean, and error response, which can be imported as we talked about. Now we will export a function called use fetch collection, and then we will send per page as a parameter, and then we use the interface to indicate what is the return type, and then we bring the user query. As we talked about, is loading, is error data, and data that can be extracted from user query, and then we can pass our connection. The unique key in this case will be the collection, and then we will have a sync, and then we will have a sync function that returns a promise, and this will be the client collection featured, and then we will send the per page as an extra option, which is it will be the query for this endpoint. And then we will check if there is a data or is error. Then we will return the data as collection response, which together with is fetching collection. So otherwise we will return is fetching collection and or has error or the error itself. Start by the photo list component, which is our home screen. So this tutorial actually is meant to be for the React query, so I will go a bit faster with the React native stuff. So first of all, that we bring the photo list as a component, but here what you can see that I brought the use is fetching. And as I said, use is fetching, it will return a value. It was called fetching, is fetching boolean value. And that will make sure that for any background fetching, so it doesn't mean that it's only for one query. Well, actually you can have it only for specific query as we talked about, but we can have it also for all the fetching data that happens in the background. So what I did actually, I brought this fetching, and then I show indicator, which is the loading in case of the collection here. So for example, if I close this and open it, you can see that this collection now is saying it was loading very fast. Now the collection I'm using, the collection, one of the query, we use the use collection, so use fetch collection. Search photos is still, I didn't use it because I exceed the limit for 1 day, so you can, but I already have the response, so I'm using the mock data here. As now what we have is that we will go directly to the render. We start from there. We have a flat list, which is what you can see here, and this container, it has a couple of styling, and then we will have the collection for all the collections. So every collection has the how many images, how many videos, and also we can see the how many pages. And also we can see the title of that, and if there is a description or not. So that's what will happen in the render collection item. If we open this, here is actually the most logic thing, and here the biggest, I mean, it should be extracted to the one component, but I use it here in the sake of this video. Now we will have a view, we will have the screen, we will bring the item, print the title, print the description, and then we'll have the scroll view that goes horizontally. And in this scroll view, and we will have also we will check if there is fetching, and as we said, is fetching here is meant to be not is loading, not the one that we use in the background. So, and then we will check if the photo responds with the photos. So we will just loop through all these photos, make a touchable opacity and with an image, as you can see. Now what happened is that actually most important is that when we click on an image, then we will navigate and we send to the route via the route the photo that we have selected. I will go back to this photo object later. The next thing is that what we will need to have a loading for every let's say for every image. So what I did actually is bring the shimmering, which meant to be is most the first three items. We can see that there is an loading with a shimmering here, but because I'm using mock data you cannot see it, but hopefully in the end of the video I will show you that. And the shimmering, if you want to understand what the shimmering is the component that used to have a couple, has some animation that start from here till here, that to indicate that there is a loading. And I had a video also to explain that, and you will see it in the one of the corners. You just follow it if you want to. And then in the end of the scroll view we have we will make sure that if there is no fetching data, and then we can show these elements also, because we don't need to show them in case of there is we still fetching. In the end I have couple touchable opacity to show more. With this, what will happen is that it will set the current page, it will increase the current page, and then take the item ID. This is what I call the collection ID, as we have talked, and then it will set it to the state, which means that if I go to a state, you can see set a state, it will take the current page and the collection ID. Now go back to my state, it will initially it will take 1 and the collection ID will be empty. And then what I will do is that I will send this to use search query. So search query or search photos, it will take the collection ID, it will take the current page, and then we will have these values. So these values is actually enabled. It meant to be that it will stop rendering, or no, sorry, it will stop fetching the data if there is no collection ID, or if there is no ID. So this, in this enabled, and the options, you can actually pause the fetching of the data, and you can actually stop it. And that's what and the other one is that the ID, so you can send any param, because we define these params. This ID I send the collection ID, so I can have the uniquely identifier inside my queries. So I don't know if this makes sense, but this is we have a lot of options that we can send to the user query, and I will go back to them, but one of them is enabled, and this is meant to be to pause the fetching. We have also from, as we said, we extracted the has error is fetching collection, so, and also these are values that we use it, and we send the page per page account. So this is 5 collections, so you see 5 collections, so per page is 5 collections we can now what we also do, that we check, because we have a values is fetching collection that or fetching photos, and we can check both of them and either one of them, and we can return also a shimmering that could indicate that to the user that we are in the loading state. Also, in the case of error, we just print the error and whatever the error it is, and this is not in the production. Don't think about it either. This is not in the production, just for me to indicate that there is an error. So back to the navigate to photos. This actual function, we will use navigation. We bring the navigation via use navigation. And then we will navigate to photo, which is the another component, and we send the param as a selected photo. So in the photo component, we don't have that much logic that we need to handle. It's more about React Native that render a couple elements. What will happen that we bring the user out, and then we bring the route, because we send this via navigation. And what we need to do is that we inside this route, so I'm extracting the data as selected photo, so you can say route params and then selected photo as a iPhoto. And in the render we will use this to render, but you can see that why I have this, you see the color of the elements is that because inside the response of this Pixels API, they have a value called average color, and this will bring the average color of the photo. And what I did is that we can make the background for whole the view as an average color. Otherwise it will just be red, green, whatever you want. And there also the loading, we put also loading to, because this photo for now, I use tiny because it has a multiple format. You can use tiny, large, original. They are very big in terms of size for the to render, and it will take time. So for example, this I'm using tiny, but this one I'm using the large, which is will take time. So I thought maybe throwing an indicator here, it will say it will indicate the user that it's loading. And this loading is handled by via the state. So I made internal state by saying this is true initially, and then we set this false after 5 seconds. Most importantly is that also we saw that in the navigation here it's also blue, and that's you can also have this you can handle this also in the navigation by setting the options. You can set the options and also set the photographer. So we have selected photo, we can do whatever we want. So we have the photographer is one of the properties inside the response of the pixels, and we can put this one here. I can put also more values here, but I thought that's one, it will be enough. It's up to you. And then also the header style is the same as the average here color. We take the average color and also is fetching is meant to be in the background for this user query. As we said, the other thing that we can do is actually, this is most typically used like user query and then send the first parameter, the second parameter is function, the third is options. But what you can do also, you can pause, you can take all of these and then send an object, and this object is actually can be used the same. So instead of for the you see I'm wrapped them with an object, and then what we can see that we will say query key, something like this, and then here we say a query function and something like this, and then we have the options, and what we can do is just do it like this. So in this case this will work the same. So this is also most typical for me. I see it's more the same. I don't see any differences, but it depends to you. Sometimes it's most helpful when you need to use multiple queries. So I will back my old code here. Now we talked about enabled and why we need enabled. So this enabled will go to the inside the options, and as I said, the enabled will be used to so actually I will make this one as an object and say enabled. So you see one of them is that enabled. So one of the options is that enabled because this one is an optional here, and but this options actually it has a lot of stuff that you can control this query, and one of them is that what we need to do is we have things called refetch on focus, and that's have the ability to disable. So you can actually disable refetch on focus for all inside the query client, or you can disable it only for the so let's go back to it. So refetch on window focus, it meant to be that in case of the app goes in the background. So this is the app now in the foreground. In case of the app goes background, this refetch is still doing refetching in the background, is doing something in the background. And if you want to disable it, you can just pause this and then you send false, and then it will be disabled for that. By default it's enabled. So that's one of the thing. So refetch is optional. So you have refetch something like this, this will be triggered manually. So in case if you want to trigger this is query manually upon condition or something like this, you can send a refetch and you can send something to it, so to trigger it manually. The other thing is that by default, so I will say this value. So by default, this value will take 3 times retry, and the retry is the same what it indicates. It will try 3 times if the query failed. So 3 times until the third time it will throw the error inside, through the error to you to indicate that there is an error. But if you want to disable it, you can have it disabled by saying false, so there is no retrying anymore, or you can have it as a number by just saying if you want to retry 6 times or 10 times. I don't know, some people want to 10 times, but 3, it seems for me logical, 3 times until you will have your data or error, and that will be now the other thing regarding to retry. So let's say we have a 3 times retry, but you can have something called retry delay, and retry delay will take milliseconds, and then you can see how many the delay to retry the query for that query. So this one also can be controlled. What other thing, you have also initial data. So initial data, there's two things here. So for initial data, that if you want to have data that will be merged together with your data, so and it's also cached, then you can use initial data. Otherwise, what you can do is a placeholder data. So this placeholder data is used to provide a data but without cached for that query. Now there is also one thing that I want to say here. Since you have query client, and then you can actually, for example, I'm just saying for example here, what you can do is getting the data. So for example, you just say get data, and then what you can try to do is get a query client and then say get data, which is something like get query data, and then you pass the key, which is the unique key that we provide for this one example. And then you will have your query data if you want to have the data inside your component, but I wouldn't recommend do that. I would suggest to use the user query. And there is also another function. It's called get query state. So get query state, and then this will also return the state of your query in case of the pending loading or idle or something like this.